Welcome back to the A to Z Sports Film Room channel for the Wednesday lunchtime mailbag. We are going to be answering questions from our fantastic subscribers and followers on Twitter. Folks, just a reminder, we do these every single Wednesday. We're going to be doing them after the NFL draft every single Wednesday. So be sure to be subscribed to the channel as well as following us on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, at Rising Draft, where we poll for questions. If you have a question about the 2025 NFL Draft, first of all, please like this stream. And also, please send us a question in the YouTube chat. We are prioritizing questions that are in the YouTube chat over the ones that are sent to us ahead of time on Twitter. Ryan, you excited? Dude, this feels so weird. You and I were just talking about this. This has been one of the longest draft cycles, I feel like, because we just keep talking about the same 10 guys. And now we're almost a week away. I don't know how the hell we got here.
Well, it's been a very weird cycle, hasn't it? I don't know if it's because, like, at my previous stop, obviously, this time last year, I was still covering recruiting and doing that type of stuff on top of, like, doing NFL draft stuff. So this is the first year of, like, it's all I do. It's just cover the draft and cover college football. So I think it's a little bit wonky, right? Like, we're still getting used to our footing in, like, the minutia of draft season, all-star circuit, combine, pro days, top 30 visits, like all this type of stuff. But it's been a wild ride, man. But we're almost there, Joe. We're almost there. We almost get to sleep for a little bit, maybe a nap occasionally. I don't know. We'll see.
But of course, we're wired though. It doesn't matter. We're extremely wired. We're ready
I'm
to
so
go.
excited, dude. Well, you know how I am. I'm a very, like, I'm a morning person, so I have a lot of natural energy just anyway. So I'm ready to go. Absolutely.
Of course. So we're, as we said, we are going to prioritize questions that we have from folks in the YouTube chat. So as people are joining in, if you've got questions, thoughts about the 2025 NFL draft, please drop them into the YouTube chat and we will get to them later on. And again, please hit that like button if you haven't done so already. There were a couple of questions, Ryan, that we had that were very similar, that were attached to the draft stocks of a couple of guys that have been considered fallers throughout this process. We also have had a lot of comments about the video that we did on Walter Nolen, James Pearce Jr., and Mike Green. Some people questioning the validity of us pointing out that there are character concerns with those guys. So I thought that these two questions that I'm going to bring up on the board here in a second were a really good starting point for the conversation because there's just so much uncertainty. And I think that there's just a general reactiveness to these guys' names. So the first question that we had from Thomas Martinez on Twitter, what do you make of the question surrounding Walter Nolen? The other question that we had, what do you think of the hot take of James Pearce Jr. and Walter Nolen falling to round 2? So I kick it to you first here, Ryan, because there's a lot to unpack. We are not just creating this out of thin air. There is reason to believe that both of these guys, especially Nolen, will not go in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, let's start there, right? Like, let's break these two up, I guess. Let's go with Walter Nolen to start. Obviously, the very talented defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, former 5-star, played at Texas A&M for 2 years, transferred to Ole Miss, just had his best year. I think he had like 8.5 sacks this past year, double-digit tackle for loss. It was like 14 tackles for loss. Joe, I don't think anybody has watched Walter Nolen and been like, hey, I don't know if Walter Nolen's that athletic.
Right.
Like no one has done that because Walter Nolen is a very talented athlete. He's a very disruptive player when he's engaged and when he's playing at his highest level. Here's the problem though. Because I'd rather break it up this way. On the film, I think some people are just overlooking lapses in efforts. I think personally they are just there. But then the other side of it is that evaluations are not just about on the fields. They're not. They are about medicals. They're about off the field character concerns. For Nolen, this stuff isn't just popping up. Like, it's not. I don't know where people have been the last few years where they think that this is just coming out of nowhere. If you followed his recruitment coming out of high school, if you followed his tenure with Texas A&M and you continue to listen to whispers for Ole Miss this past year, there's a lot of baggage there, man. There is. And I will say this, Joe. We were amongst the first, I think, to kind of put this energy out into the universe. All I'll say, though, is in some prominent NFL draft analysts out in the industry, you are starting to see more and more of him not in the first round. Or if he is in the first round, he's going like pick 32 to the Eagles or something, even though you could argue that he's probably a top 15 talent, just overall physical gifts. in this class. There is a reason for that. I do think that he has a very strong possibility to fall out of round one. One, due to lapses on the field, but two, there is extreme maturity, character concerns here, guys. There's extreme ones, and I think that will cause a nice fall for the Ole Miss defensive tackle.
Right. Again, that's like the big thing to reiterate here is that it's not that there's no world for him to succeed in the NFL. Like he has all of the talent. And I think that a lot of times when you bring up a guy being really inconsistent on film and a guy having worries of like if he's going to pan out, you automatically assume that you're implying that he's not a good football player. Like that's what the automatic implication
Which is not what
is.
this is.
We're,
absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
The thing that you hear surrounding him is that he is not as focused and as motivated. And I also think anyone who's watched enough film on Walter Nolen sees that on film. The effort that he gives is inconsistent. The same thing applies for James Pearce Jr. The effort that James Pearce Jr. gives is inconsistent. The James Pearce Jr. character concerns, I think, are less significant. I think that if of the
less
two,
prominent.
if there was a
less prominent, I would say that. Yep.
If there's a player of the two that I think is the most likely to go in the first round, I think it is going to be James Pearce Jr. But the one thing that I've brought up before on these mailbags that really bugged me is that he had really good tape as a sophomore. He showed immense potential as a sophomore, and then he just didn't really take a step forward. He stayed exactly the same. And as I didn't think anything of it really, I just noted that. I'm like, okay, this didn't go as I thought it was going to this offseason. I was hoped that he was going to take this big leap. But then as I started talking to you and we started to hear at the NFL Combine that there was a belief that he was not as focused and motivated and locked in and wanting to chase his goals of becoming a premier NFL player as aggressively as he would need to. And it makes sense not seeing that leap that would basically imply that he wasn't pushing himself enough. And then that was why those rumors came out.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because it is a little bit troubling when you consider the fact that he didn't take that step, to your points, that when you hear the concerns of him, because it's not really character as much, more of his stuff is like work ethic issues, right? Like, does he really want to be really good player? Like those types of things. And when you combine those with the fact that he didn't take a huge jump in 2024, you get kind of like concerned of like, hey man, like, I don't know, like this kid has a crazy ceiling if he wants to hit the ceiling, but does he want to hit the ceiling? Like that's a very interesting conversation to have. I will say this. Here's my hot take. I don't know if this is hot take, Joe. I don't know if this is hot take. I think out of the two, Pearce and Nolen, I think one will go in the first round and one will not. I don't know exactly which
I agree
one
with
it
that.
is
I agree
yet.
with that.
Like I could see a Baltimore Ravens, a Philadelphia Eagles, a Buffalo Bills, like one of those franchises that have a good infrastructure, say I want to take a James Pearce Jr. I could also see the same happening. Like if the Eagles drafted at 32 Walter Nolen, I would not be shocked at all with how they love defensive tackle play. But I do think that there's a good chance that one falls out of the first round. I would be slightly surprised if both fall out, but I do think at least one falls out of the first rounds. That's my, I don't know, a lukewarm take. I don't even know if it's a hot take at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's well. And now the framing of the question too of like, is it a hot take? I don't really think it is a hot take. I also think that generally as this process goes on, we're in the period of time where the meetings are the most recent thing that's happened. The pro days, the workouts, all that stuff is behind us. So the lasting impression of NFL teams, just think subconsciously the interactions. Yeah. If somebody who's maybe less well-rounded, less explosive, just killed their interview, that is subconsciously going to stick in the heads of general managers, head coaches, all of those things that could maybe, if they're coming down to that decision point between two prospects, in this circumstance, another edge rusher and James Pearce Jr., another defensive tackle and Walter Nolen, that they might end up leaning to go in that opposite direction. So I don't think it's a hot take. I think that this is more realistic than people realize.
Well, and then the last thing I'll say is I think the one thing that Pearce does have to his advantage comparative to Nolen is Nolen's in a very deep defensive tackle class. Like this is a historically deep defensive tackle group. Edge group is good. It's very good still, but it's not as deep as defensive tackle. Like the point being is that I think Walter Nolen is more likely to fall out because of the demand at the position or the supply at the position, I should say. While I think, here's the thing, Joe. Right now, let's say in theory, Abdul Carter, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green are all off the board, before pick like 25, let's say. Let's say they're all off the board. If you want an impact pass rusher in the late first round, is there any other option that's out there of like a true impact pass rusher, right? In the same tier of a James Pearce Jr.? Is there anybody? Like, you're not taking, I don't know, like, well, I guess some people would take Donovan Izaraku. I would not personally take Donovan Izaraku, but that's a conversation for a different day, I suppose. But I just think that the classes, Nolen has less of an advantage comparative to Pearce. I think Pearce is more likely to latch onto a first round conversation.
And also just the last part with that, I think to Pearce is, I really think Pearce is going to go before Mike Green, because Mike Green's issues are,
I don't know.
You don't think so with the sexual assault allegations that were against him when he was younger and the way that he was handling those questions?
I think there's several teams that are out on Mike Green, but I don't think every team's out on Mike Green. So it's going to be interesting.
That's a fair point.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
SCU Productions in the chat threw in here on Nolen before we get to more YouTube questions. He said, I watched Nolen the other day and have a second round grade on him. And that's a totally fair grade. I think I have an early second on him because of the inconsistency on tape, but seeing the potential. That doesn't even factor in the character stuff. So I agree with that second round grade. Early second round, late first is totally reasonable for Walter Nolen. He needs to put the same effort in.
Situation is so important for Walter Nolen. Like, if he goes to a good infrastructure and they develop him from a young man perspective and from a maturity perspective, he could end up being one of the better defensive players in this draft. It's just, if he doesn't land in the right culture, though, then that's where you get really, really worried about it. You know what I mean? Like, Jalen Carter is I don't think Jalen Carter's are nearly as severe. I know he had the one massive incident. I'm not downplaying it at all, but like, there is a recurring issue with Walter Nolen. There was not really a recurring issue with Jalen Carter. He had just a spotty thing happen that was awful, right? But Jalen Carter landing in Philadelphia is perfect for him, right? Because he's a little rough around the edges. And what has Philadelphia done? They helped him grow as a person and as a football player. If Walter Nolen lands in a good situation like that, then I think that he could potentially be a very good player on the NFL level. It's just a lot is going to be needed. Support, a lot of supports around him.
Guys, reminder, if you're on YouTube, we've got a nice little audience slowly growing. Hit that like button if you're tuning in, and also drop your 2025 NFL draft questions in the chat. We're going to try and answer as many as possible before 1 p.m. Eastern time when the stream is over. The first question that we're going to get to, Fisherman asks us, do you think the Saints look at quarterback now with the Derek Carr news at pick 9? And the news he's referring to is that Diana Rossini reported that he was hiding a injury issue, a recovery issue, in order to prevent, I guess, the Saints from considering taking a quarterback and making him a bridge quarterback. First of all, with that rumor, I feel like if that was Carr's logic, I don't think that like really completely takes the possibility of him being a bridge quarterback out of the equation. I kind of thought, I found that a little funny because I was like, is that you being healthy like really going to stop them? Is that really going to stop them from taking a quarterback if they don't trust you?
That's very you've seen Draft Day, have you? Have you seen Draft
Day?
The movie?
Yes.
Okay. That's very
They're the Cleveland Browns. They're literally the Cleveland Browns. Who's Vontae Mack? Who's Vontae Mack in this situation?
Vontae Mack.
Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter.
Oh shit!
They're gonna trade. We just figured it out. They're gonna trade up to the first overall pick, or maybe not the first overall, but the second overall pick. Shedeur Sanders is what was the name of the quarterback?
My God, he went to Wisconsin. Bo Callahan.
Shedeur Sanders is Bo Callahan. Everybody is overanalyzing him. Why didn't anybody go to Shedeur Sanders' birthday party? The Saints, the rumors of him dealing with injury issues at Derek Carr and his ability to play right away.
Bryce Drew, man. That's what I was trying to compare him to. He's Bryce Drew. He's the other quarterback. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Well, and the other. Actually, no, I don't know if I was going to compare the general managers, but that actually doesn't really work in the situation. I think this is draft day. Where's P. Diddy? Where's P. Diddy in this situation?
Oh, do you want to go into where P. Diddy is right now? I mean,
no, I'm obviously joking. All right, so okay. What do you think of this though? Yeah, what do you think of this whole thought?
Saints are a very strange team. There's like some early Jackson Dart things, but then Nick Underhill came out and was like, "Hey, I think the Saints kind of like Jackson Dart, but they like him as like a second round pick, not a ninth overall selection." You know what I mean?
Right.
They are one of the easiest teams though to potentially trade up to get Shador, or stay at 9 and trade Shador. The other one, I mean, I guess is we talked about it, like the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. Like, do they want to move up for Shador Sanders? Like, is that in their cards? But I think it's possible, but I don't know why, Joe, but there's something about the situation that tells me like that they might just take best player available. I don't know what it is, and I can't really like, because in theory, a young quarterback would make a lot of sense, right? Like Kellen Moore's the new head coach, first year. He's a quarterback himself. Like you would think that he would want his guy, but there's just something weird there that's just like stopping me from being like, yeah, they're going to definitely take a quarterback at 9. It's a little funky.
I think generally, like the one like thing with me with the Saints and what makes sense for them to do, there's a lot of directions that they can go in.
Yep.
The lack of talent in the quarterback class makes me feel like that if there's literally only one premier option and then another decent option in Shador Sanders, that you don't exactly like freak out at 9 and feel like you have to launch yourself to go get him. If Shador Sanders lands in their lap, I think that they would consider it. But forcing the Jackson Dart pick that you just mentioned there, that doesn't make any sense to me. I really don't think that that's going to come to fruition. That has been the one rumor and the one speculation that whenever I get asked about it, I'm like, oh, do you think that Jackson Dart's going to go in the top 15 or the top 10? I say, no. If somebody takes him, it's going to be the back end of the first round. The NFL, now more than ever, with college quarterbacks not being prepared for the NFL game, they are banking on tools. They're banking on guys that have an elite trait somewhere. And as much as we talk about how Shador Sanders maybe doesn't have the elite arm strength and he's not a big time athlete, he still is elite in accuracy and processing and those areas. So some teams are going to really covet that, are going to really like that about him. So Jackson Dart doesn't bring any of that. There's nothing there that Jackson Dart is going to present teams that they're going to say, oh, you know what, we're going to take that shot. And in this case, the Saints would be the ones doing it at pick 9.
Not to pile up on Jackson Dart, but it is kind of the weirdest quarterback hype that I've seen the last couple of years. Because typically, what do, Joe? We overhype like crazy tools, because like Will Levis was one guy that ended up going in the second, but like people wanted to talk about him because he had a strong arm and he was a good athlete and all those types of things. I think Jackson Dart's a good athlete, but I just don't see the arm strength. Like I don't see the arm talents. Like I just think that he has just very average to below average physical tools from a passing perspective. So I'm just a little bit confused why he continues to be the guy that people just prop up as a top 10 overall draft pick. I don't know. I think ultimately this is going to be one of those situations where there's been so much hype and he's just going to go on day 2. Like he's just going to be a second round pick, and then people are going to be like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever." Here's
a last bit with that. If Will Levis didn't go in the first round, who is a cannon for an arm, and forget how he's played with the Titans so far. Coming in, everyone was talking about how he has the best tools of anybody in that quarterback class. He didn't go in the first round. He slid out. So why all of a sudden, what does Jackson Dart do that makes him a first rounder?
I think the comparison more is to Kenny Pickett, right? Kenny Pickett was modest tools and like he was a good athlete, not a great athlete. Yeah. Arm was average for NFL standards. That's the comparison more, because Pickett went 20th overall, right, to the Steelers that year, but he was also the only quarterback
it was very late
in that first round. Yeah. So I think that's the comparison. I guess I don't know. I still don't think it happens, but would it shock me if a team drafted him in the back end of the first round? It wouldn't shock me, but it would shock me if he goes top 10 though. It would absolutely shock me if he went that early.
Yeah, Fisherman pointed out that the Saints are in a couple-year rebuild with the cap situation.
Don't disagree with that.
I completely agree with that. I was asked about this last night when I was on Mad Dog Sports Radio, and when I was talking about it, like this was the big driving force of, hey, this is a multi-year process. Like you don't need to rush this.
Yep.
Kellen Moore, one of the things, if you read up on what the Saints and more of those conversations were like, it sounded like that he wanted to be assured that he was going to get the time and the patience to build this thing, because it is a really difficult rebuilding spot with the lack of available salary cap room. So throwing in a quarterback that you're lukewarm on into the mix with a first round pick is not how you get back on track. You maybe take, like you mentioned, Jackson Dart in the second round, Will Howard in the fourth round, just somebody to have a young guy in the room to compete with Spencer Rattler. And then it doesn't really cost you anything if you get rid of him or you move him to the practice squad or whatever.
And if you miss, no one remembers, right? Because he was a day 2 quarterback. Like the hit rate is very small, obviously. You know what's an interesting conversation, Joe, that we haven't had at all? What does a Kellen Moore quarterback look like? Was he the offensive coordinator for Dallas when they first drafted Dak? I can't remember if he was. Was he?
He was. It was. He was. His quarterbacks are Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. 3 guys.
But he also walked into both of the last 2, though, right? Like he didn't draft Justin or draft Jalen Hurts. Like he walked into those.
I don't think he was.
What I mean?
I don't think he was the first offensive coordinator for Dak Prescott. So, like, I think that he technically inherited all of those situations.
That's my point. He's walked into the situation where there was already a stable quarterback.
Right. So we don't know.
Right. So I don't know what Kellen Moore actually likes at a quarterback. I think that this is fascinating because we could see something happen at 9 that we're not expecting, right? Like maybe he does take a Shedeur, maybe he does take a Jackson. Like I don't know, but I think it's going to be very telling. And even if it goes to the day 2 of like what type of quarterback that he targets, it's going to be very interesting to see what a Kellen Moore quarterback looks like. Cause I don't actually know what that is. I mean, cause in theory, Kellen Moore was a 5'11", gamer at Boise State who was had no tools, but was just very accurate and tough, right? Like, does he like a guy that's more accurate, ball out on time? Does he like a guy that can extend? I just really don't know what exactly a Kellen Moore quarterback looks like.
I almost kind of wonder, and I always feel like when you have a guy who was a former quarterback, notable college quarterback, he played a little bit in the league as a backup. I kind of think that the direction would be the polar opposite. Because think of it this way: if
he wants to
right.
Yeah.
Well, like all tools, like big, powerful, big arm,
Justin Herbert,
mobile, right? Right. And Jalen Hurts is another example of that, like a big, strong, like just athletic guy that you're able to be multiple. Because if you just think of the mental approach for an offensive coordinator that was a former quarterback, you would be excited by being able to do things that you physically could not do. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I mean, because you wanted that. Well, I'll say it like this. I think if you're a quarterback or you're just a player in general and you know your own limitations, right? Kellen Moore obviously knew what he wasn't good at and he stayed within what he was good at. I'm sure that he imagined at points of like, man, imagine what I could do if I had a stronger arm. Imagine what I could do if I was a better athlete. The opportunity there. I mean, yes. And then also, there's also the thing of guys typically kind of like to go the opposite when there's a change that happens. That's why we always see like when a defensive-minded head coach gets fired, they usually go like the whiz kid offensive coach or vice versa, right? So I am very interested in that, man. I don't think we've talked about that enough because some people have just kind of said like, oh, they're going to take a quarterback at 9 or take a quarterback in the second round or take a quarterback just in general at some point in this draft. But my question is, what do they look like? What do they do well? Because there's some similarities between like a Jalen Hurts and a Dak Prescott, for instance, right? Like pretty athletic dudes, but for the most part, like he has just walked into situations where they've had a quarterback. So he's never had to handpick his guy from scratch. And we're potentially going to know about that very soon.
All right. We got more questions we got to get to. Again, anyone who's tuned in and hasn't done so already, please hit the like button on the live stream. And if you have a question that you want to ask us, if you're tuning in on Twitter, hop in the YouTube, ask us this question on YouTube. We're prioritizing those questions. And if you're already in the chat and you have a thought, let us know. We're going to try and answer these questions a little bit more succinctly for these because we got a lot of questions in here so far. H-Town Bop says, why is everybody getting lower on Milam? I think that one's just simply the beginning of the draft process. His Senior Bowl was a little underwhelming. Yeah, we talked about this last week.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was pretty shaky. He's making a transition from tackle to guard most likely. And I think that naturally the combine and these pro days, we've had some offensive linemen that have tested through the roof that have put up some great numbers. So I think naturally it's easy for the more athletic guys to start to rise.
It is a weird fall though, because I mean, most mock drafts before the Senior Bowl, you're talking about him in like the 30s and the 40s, and now you're seeing him like in the 80s and 90s in like some mock drafts and some simulators and such. So it's very interesting. I still like Millam. Again, I don't think
Yeah,
that he's a tackle on
good
the
player.
NFL level because of length and concerns and stuff, but I still think he's a starting guard without question. I think that guy will still go potentially top 50. So I think it's just a little bit of what do we do every year, Joe? We always tell people do not do not go over the top on this on just 1 week of practice, right? You have 4 years of game film on a Wyatt Millam if you want to go watch and see what he's about. And it's not like he's coming from a FCS program or Division II program where like the competition concerns, like he played Power 4 football. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like he was playing nobodies. So he played Abdul Carter the first game of the year, and he shut Abdul Carter down for the most part, right? So he's a good football player. He's a guard. I think some of that transitional stuff hurt him at the Senior Bowl, but I just don't want to overthink one week of practice.
Next question that we're going to get to, and this is an interesting one. Connor Laws, can you convince the Titans to not pick Cam Ward for me? Connor, you don't do this. Don't do you. Like, in all seriousness, I'm a Giants fan. I don't want to hear Titans fans complaining about them getting Cam Ward, because I would do anything
if they want to complain.
No. I would do anything as a Giants fan to get Cam Ward. They can't.
Anything?
They screwed themselves. Yes,
Anything?
anything. They screwed themselves.
What is the worst thing that you would do to get Cam Ward on your football team?
I would shave my head if it meant that we were going to get Cam Ward. I absolutely would do that. They screwed themselves by beating the Colts in a meaningless game out of a position to be able to pick Cam Ward. He is the prize of the limited quarterback options in this class. If he was in last year's class, he would be the pick ahead of Michael Penix, in my opinion. He would still go in the first round. Yeah. I'm saying after this past season in Miami, not last year. I'm saying after this past season in Miami, if we combine the two classes, he would be right in front of with like a very similar grade to Michael Penix, worthy of going in the top 15.
Yeah, no, I think he would have definitely been in the first round conversation last year without question. I don't think that he's look. The Titans are in a really weird spot, Connor. Like they're in a very strange spot. You're only in year 2 under Brian Callahan as your head coach, but there's already like some heat coming down on him as far as like if he has another bad year, who knows, right? Like the immediacy of that tenure. So I don't mind the swing. Is Cam Ward the best player in this draft? No, he is not the best player in this draft. But you are a team that needs a quarterback desperately, and Cam Ward has great tools. So I understand why it is unsettling to some people. I get it, right? Like he holds the ball too long at times. He's a little bit volatile. The ball placement can be inconsistent. But man, if you put good support around him, I still think that he could be a very, very good player. And I will always take that swing. It's easier for me to say because my job's not on the line, but like I would also take the swing at number 1 with Cam Ward. I would.
Next question from SCU Productions. We're getting a lot of great questions in the chat, by the way. We're going to try and be a little more rapid fire and answer as many of these as possible before we close out. We've got 30 minutes left.
You will not silence
we're going to try and get.
You will not silence me.
I will silence you. But the goal is to answer as many as possible. So please, any inkling of a thought, no question is a dumb question. I'm sure somebody will try to disprove that, but hit the like button too if you're tuning in. SU Productions asks, I've got a question for y'all. What's crazier, having Will Johnson as my number 4 player, a blue chip prospect, or Shamar Stewart as my 5 highest graded non-blue chip prospect? So I'm assuming in your like second tier, as we've been doing our position rankings, he's number 5 in your second tier. So maybe that would make him like number 9 overall.
Number 9. Yeah.
I don't think either of these things are crazy.
He's asking what's more crazy. You have to pick one.
But I know I'm not going to pick one because I don't think either are crazy. And here's why. I think that Will Johnson, as we talked about, has been one of the most unnecessarily criticized prospects over the past month. He is instinctual. He is long. He's got great ball skills. He is somebody who could be a Pat Surtain level outside corner in the NFL. He deserves to be
a good comp. Pat Surtain's a good comp.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He is. There's a really strong chance that he ends up being, or let me rephrase. He would be my 4th highest rated blue chip guy. He would be behind currently Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and Ashton. Actually, I don't know if I had Ashton Jetty as a blue chip, but regardless, Shamar Stewart up that high, if you're banking on traits, I don't think is really that hot of a take either. I think a lot of people tend to agree with that.
So I will answer your question because you asked a question and Joe decided to
Nope.
skate around it instead of actually answering the question.
Well, because
I
neither
think-
are really that crazy. I think they're both
Yeah, but he's
reasonable.
asking which one is more crazy. He's asking a question. You have to answer
If he
the
said
question.
no, that's not true.
That's how this works. That's how it works.
No, I answered the question. I said it wasn't crazy.
Here's the answer. I think if I had to pick between the two, Will Johnson being a blue chip at 4 or Shamar Stewart being the second tier at number 5, I would pick Shamar Stewart as the more the crazier one if I had to pick one. I think that Will Johnson is very clean prospect who's still recovering from an injury and ran a bad short shuttle, and people are over analyzing it because transitional quickness and change of direction is not a concern for Will Johnson. Like, it is just not a concern for Will Johnson. I need this. If you disagree, I'm at Rise and Draft on Twitter. You can drop a picture or a video of a rep where you say, wow, man, that change of direction really stinks. Like, please do it. I beg people to show me some proof of concept of this perspective because I just disagree with it so much. Shamar Stewart, I'm okay with you having him at 9 potentially in a big board based upon upside. But if I had to pick one or the other, I would go Shamar just based upon there is a conversation that needs to happen of peaks and valleys, right? Like, the upside is here, but the floor is like way down here, right? So if I'm trying to balance out, I would pick that one, but I don't think either one's crazy to Joe's point, but I followed the rules and actually answered your question. So you're welcome.
Oh, okay. Well, you still agreed with me that neither is really that crazy of a point. All right, let's get to the next question. And we have another Will Johnson related question from Fisherman.
And also real quick, we convinced Connor that Cam Ward.
Yes,
is the right
I saw
pick,
that.
So there it is. Yeah, good.
There we go. I agree with you. I said at the beginning of the process, Connor says, I still want Abdul Carter, but you've convinced me to settle for Cam Ward. I, at the beginning of the process, said just take Abdul Carter and don't look back. But as this process has evolved, they have deemed that quarterback is more valuable for them to turn to, and having a franchise quarterback to build around is a lot more valuable than any other position on the field. So Be happy that you're getting Cam Ward, who has some insane traits.
And
all right, let's get
leaving, which is always great too. So yes.
Fisherman's next question. Do you think Will Johnson will fall out of the first round? Seems like a lot of negative buzz this close to the draft. No, when you don't have like character question marks, that is the negative buzz for a player, and all it is media members. It's really only media members that I see talking about like, oh, he ran a 4.33 in his short shuttle, which you mentioned a second ago. This is, if any, whispers from NFL teams are trying to convince media members to put this out. This is some sort of a smokescreen that's trying to hope that teams picking in the teens that he slides to them. I think there's a lot of teams in the teens, especially the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Bengals, that would love to have Will Johnson starting on the outside. So no, falling out of the first round is way too far for me.
I would be shocked if he fell out of the first round. If he fell out of the top 10, would not be shocked. If he fell out of the top 15, would not be shocked, would be slightly surprised. But if he went out of the top 32, I would be like, I just don't get it. Because also, Joe, in this corner class, there's a couple other question marks of corners too, like Ravel with his injury and Jahdae Barron with his flexibility to play both outside and inside. Like, there's some question marks with this class. Like, there is. And then also the Cleveland Browns might be drafting Travis Hunter to just play wide receiver. Like, so who's the first actual corner off the board? Like, all these things are on the table potentially. So I still believe that Will Johnson is going to go pretty early. 13 to Miami feels like a spot that makes so much sense now with the Jalen Ramsey news. So much sense.
Could I make a crazy pitch before we get to the next question?
Depends.
If there is a position where there is a really, and you just kind of laid the framework for this, if there is a position where there is a really random player that is the first at that position, I feel like corner would be that position, because you just brought up maybe some of those concerns are real. That doesn't drop Will Johnson out of the first round, but injury stuff for Ravel drops him out of the first. Questions on roll drops Barron. Like, what if Maxwell Hairston was the first corner off the
I'll
board?
give you a crazy one, and I don't even think that this is like that hot of a take, and it is going to drive you insane. What if Trey Amos from Ole Miss is the first corner off the board.
All right, no,
Joe, it is not that.
I'm not allowing that to happen.
It's not
I don't think it's
unrealistic.
unrealistic. If that happens, I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to be like, this is, and we've got a video dropping of most overrated players in the draft, and one of my picks is Trey Amos. He's not a first round corner. He is a zone corner. What was the thing that you told me early on when I first got into this and we first started working together? What was the thing that you told to me about zone corners?
Best early advice that I got, I reached out to a position coach of the school, and he had a prospect that year, a cornerback. And I asked him, hey, have the scouts been over there to see him? And they said, oh, yeah, he's been over. I was like, oh, well, if you could describe that corner, like what type of corner is he? Zone, man? Like what's his style? And he said to me, he said, scouts don't come through asking about zone corners. They don't do it. They come to ask for man-to-man corners. And I get it, right? Like if you can play man, I can teach better zone discipline, Joe. I can't teach a guy to have the hip fluidity, long speed, and length to be able to play man-to-man on a high level, right? Consistently.
Yep.
So yes, that was something that I learned very early on. And I have typically been very consistent with man cover corners, and versatile players that can do different level variations of coverages are usually guys that I tend to gravitate towards a little bit.
Generally, too, I feel like we've had in the last 4 years, we've had a lot of corners that have gone in the end of the first round that are not even with their teams anymore, maybe 5 years too. And the two characteristics that have stood out to me that have caused those guys to not pan out: bad hips, poor hip fluidity, and poor length. I'm trying to think of somebody was just on the tip of my tongue of somebody who fits that description. Who is that one Auburn corner?
Roger McCreary.
Yes, Roger McCreary is a really good example.
I was not a Roger McCreary fan, by the way.
I'm trying to think of some more of these other guys that I'm drawing a blank on some of these other late first round corners that didn't really pan out. But McCreary was really short armed.
He went in the second, I think, McCreary, didn't he? Didn't he go really second?
No, he went in the. Or am I thinking of the other kid?
What's the other kid?
No,
what position?
The other kid
you're
from
talking about
Auburn.
You're talking about Noah Igbenogany, right? From
Igbenogany. That is who I'm thinking of. I don't know why that was the first guy that popped in my head, but a lot of times the reason why those guys don't end up panning out is because they lack particular traits that allow for them to be successful in multiple roles and not just zone specific. Those zone guys go on day two.
Man, I remember Miami Dolphins at that point too had a healthy Byron Jones, and I think they had Jalen Ramsey, and they somebody else. I can't. They had two. Xavier Howard, Xavier Howard. They had X at one spot, and then they just paid big money for Byron Jones, and he was healthy at that point. And they're like, we're going to draft Noah Igbenogany in the back of the first round. It's like, to play nickel? Like, what are we doing here? It didn't make any sense. It was the weirdest thing of all time.
All right, I'm going to read through a couple of these guys because my memory is horrendous. Jeff Gladney was another guy that didn't really have the tools to succeed, and hasn't really done much. That was in the 2020 draft.
TCU. Jeff
20, that was the other guy I was trying to remember of. I was like, there was a TCU kid, but I can't remember who it was. Some guys from 2021. Eric Stokes has been okay.
Nah, he was pretty good as a rookie, and then he's just been banged up and not good the last couple of years for Georgia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, out of Georgia. So, yeah.
2022, some of the guys that fit that. Lewis Seen was a safety.
He was a safety that they're trying to play.
Kyer Elam was one. Kyer Elam is a really good example of a guy who didn't work.
Yeah.
Who went in the end of the first round.
I didn't love
because
Kyer
he was somebody who
either.
couldn't play man. Very similar.
Yeah.
To Amos.
He was stiff. He was massive. Like Kyer was a huge corner. Yeah. There wasn't him to Xavier Rhodes, and that did not work out too well.
There wasn't anybody in 2023, but those were the first couple guys that popped in my head that I couldn't put my finger on. All right, let's get to the next question though that we have, because we've got a lot of really good ones. Irish Gordon Jordian Knott.
Get Irish Gordian Knott. You call him IGK.
Gordian.
He's an Irish breakdown listener, and he's in the chat.
Who will be this year's Jalen Carter? Who do you think?
That's going to fall due to character concerns or off the field concerns.
I guess.
Or
Well, will
or am I
fall and then end up being a tremendous player.
okay, unnecessarily fall and then end up being a awesome player. Okay. That's an interesting question. I mean, Will Johnson, we just talked about, right? Like, I mean, if he falls a little bit, I think Malachi Starks, same school too. Malachi Starks. People are just overthinking Malachi Starks. He could potentially fall. He could be in the 20s potentially, maybe even the back end of round one, far in the back end of round one, and he's going to end up being the best safety in this class, in my opinion. He's the overthought, fantastic player. He doesn't exactly fit the criteria because he doesn't have like huge off the field concerns, but I do think he is suffering a ton from overthink and draft analysis right now. Or what's the draft? What's the word I'm thinking of? Like when you overthink, analysis paralysis. There's another
analysis by
word
paralysis. Paralysis by analysis. Jeez, if anyone can't tell that we're both mentally I did 6 guest spots yesterday, and that's like not even
I always
the
love how
high
you see
for the
that
amount
stuff
that I'm going to do.
Hey guys, I go on the radio a lot, man. I'm a
No.
big time guest.
That's not what I'm doing here. I'm merely just pointing out, Ryan, that we're both running on
fumes.
fumes.
Do you have 2 kids and a wife as well? Are you running off of those fumes too?
Wait, somebody commented Jeff Gladney passed away in 2022? Am I thinking of somebody else?
I think Jeff Gladney was already off the team and everything, right? Like he flamed out before that, I think. So he did pass away.
Yeah,
I mean
that was unrelated. Maybe I misremembered. Apologies if I misremembered that. The next question that we have, following the Ravens front office for the Chargers, they have taken 60% DB pass catcher edge in their first round picks going back to 2014. At pick 22, who would be the best case for those positions?
For the Chargers. Wait, why am I comparing the Chargers to the Ravens? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I'm a little confused by this question. Following the Ravens front office for the Chargers, they've taken.
Okay, so ideologically, like that's what we're going to do for the Chargers. Is that what we're saying?
Is this question too confusing to answer?
Let's go with the Chargers. So they're talking about pass catchers, corners. Was the question? Was that defensive backs?
Yes.
Okay, defensive backs and wide receivers in pick 22 for the Chargers. Well, the spot that you keep mocking, right, is Colston Loveland's. Isn't that your dude for the Chargers at 22? Isn't that who you keep talking about, Joe?
Yes, that's who. Well, I mean, it obviously makes a ton of sense for him to end up being the pick for Jim Harbaugh to just go grab his tight end. But yeah, that's the one that I keep pointing to.
People are also confused in the chat, so we're not the only ones that.
Maybe we should jump to the next question because I'm generally very confused.
We'll hit it real quick though. The Chargers, I think at 22, if they're going to go pass catcher, I think tight end we can include in that conversation, right? If they're going wide receiver, if a Tetaroa McMillan's there at 22, I think that'd be interesting because they have Lad McConkey, who's a shorter slot, super good in tight spaces, can play in the slot, but they don't really have a boundary, right? Like a guy that can play outside the numbers. Ted McMillan would be very interesting. Corners, I mean, you have a pick from a lot of guys. Siobhan Ravel from ECU is a long, explosive corner. Maxwell Hairston, who's the fastest player in this draft to our knowledge, right? So there's a few interesting conversations that are there.
All right, let's get to this next question, one that's hopefully a little bit more clear. Not saying that it wasn't, it's just a little too much going on there.
You're fine, man. Just go.
IGK asks, which prospects, college situation, coaching scheme, or teammates hid their true NFL potential, and how will they surprise us as pros? So a guy that maybe wasn't in a good situation. Oh, Colston Loveland, I think, is the easiest one for that because this past year was a little banged up.
Though we saw it 2 years ago, though.
We did, but I think that there's been a little bit of a just drop for him, a little bit of a drop off for him that he hasn't been getting as much love as Tyler Warren has because he wasn't getting the ball because they didn't even throw him the damn ball. They didn't run it every game.
He's also not as good as Tyler Warren, so that won't help.
I know. I'm not saying that he's. I'm just actually, I have him higher than Tyler Warren, but I think that he is a really good example.
Yes, I think he's a very interesting one. We talked about Malachi Starks already. I think 2023 version of Malachi Starks, like that's who Malachi Starks is for me. Like 2024, where they asked him to play a lot in the slot as like a nickel. I just don't think that's him, right? Like he can do that at times, but he's a rangy guy from the third level that's going to play single high free safety a ton and utilize that range to open up and run. So I think that there's a lot of upside still there with a Malachi Starks. Does Shamar Stewart count into this conversation, right? Because Shamar was kind of
I think that's another good one. Yeah, he wasn't well, and his teammate Nick Scourton's another one who we've talked about. He was asked to bulk up, and the weight that he was playing at was a little bit too high. He lacked the flexibility. He didn't have the same amount of juice that he had when he was at Purdue, and now he's leaned back down. And if there's an early second round pick that goes on to be super dominant, I think Scourton would be a good example.
They are the biggest evidence to me that Mike Elko did not have a ton of defensive control this past year, and Jay Bateman run the defense, because they just did not use some guys very well, in my opinion. Even like Torian York, who's not in this class, who's a linebacker that was a true sophomore this year, he took a step back too in 2024 compared to where he was as a true freshman in 2023. So hopefully Texas A&M gets that figured out, because they wasted a little bit of some good defensive talent, man. Like, why was Nick Scourton 285 pounds, Joe? Why was he 285 pounds? Can someone answer that question? Like,
no defensive end needs to be that big. No defensive
also, when
end
he played
needs to be
260, 265, and he looked like a first round pick, you also didn't need to be 285 pounds. That was, very misused.
Yeah, he was just a walking question mark. It just not everything was there coming into the season, and it never came to fruition. And IGK points out that he had Scourton in mind when he pointed out the question. I really think that he could end up exploding into becoming a great player.
I can say this now because Scourton like shedded the weight and he looks good now. He's like 257, 260 pounds, like in that ballpark. I was uploading a picture of him earlier for an article. He looked fat at Texas A&M, like just flat out. He looked
fat
unhealthy.
on film.
He looked unhealthy. Why was he that much weight? I really want to go talk to someone at Texas A&M and respectively ask, like, what was the thought process to make Nick Scourton 285 plus pounds? What was the thought process? I don't get it. Like, you had an easy ticket there, right? Like, bring him in 265 pounds, go be what you already were, and we can improve some parts of your hand usage and consistency. And like, we could do that. But for whatever reason, getting him over 285 pounds did not make any sense to me.
All right, let's get to a few more questions here. We're going to be closing out in the next 7 minutes. So if you want to rip a couple more in, if you have any thoughts about the 2025 draft, please send them over. The next one that we had that caught my attention was, how might the 2025 draft's historically deep defensive line class force teams to rethink their offensive line investments in rounds 1 through 3? So I've brought this up a couple of times. There's some teams that are picking in the top 15 that need offensive and defensive line help. And 3 of them are in the top 10, that being the Patriots, the Jaguars, and the Raiders, that could go either side of the football. I would argue that there's a world where we could see an earlier run on offensive linemen, because after round 3, there is a huge drop off in caliber of talent. The other thing, too, is historically, drafting day 2 offensive linemen has not panned out. A lot of times those guys that we talk up and we think like, oh, maybe this guy on day 2 could end up working. It's a very low hit rate for second round developmental offensive linemen. It doesn't always really work or come to fruition. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see teams thinking about drafting Mason Graham in the top 10 going, oh man, I'd really rather take Armand Membu and just see who's on the board in the second round, because I'd rather have an average starter at D tackle and get the most out of the surrounding cast and have a plus starter at offensive line.
I think that this is a rule that's generally speaking for the position that we call the priority or paramount positions in the NFL, right? This is quarterback, this is offensive tackle, this is defensive ends and pass rushers. Like, this is the spot you always want to, and that's why those players tend to get pushed up the board, because those are the most important positions in the game of football, right? And that's why we tend to prioritize those things. We always talk about positional value, like the value pushes those spots up the board. I will say this though, Joe, for an offensive line conversation though, I think it's okay to take a day 2 guard. Like, it's okay to take a day 2 center. Like, those spots tend to.
But tackle, we're talking tackle.
Oh, absolutely. Tackle, they go in the first rounds. If it's a tackle worth anything, they go in the first round. There's no doubt about that. Defensive end is the same. Quarterback is the same. You're going to hit occasionally, but the hit rate obviously will start to trend downward at those positions prospectively. So yes, I agree with you that if I had to prioritize offensive tackle versus defensive tackle in the first round, and they're similarly graded players, I would always defer to the more important position, which would be the offensive tackle spot.
We have other questions we have to get to, but IGK just dropped the hell of a nugget in the chat here. He said, my high school best friend got drafted in the second round by the Packers simply based on his combine testing numbers, and he flopped bad. Do you know how old IGK is? I kind of want to try guessing who this is.
I actually don't want to. I've met IGK in person.
Okay, never mind. We won't dox him.
Insult him. I don't know how old he is.
Okay, we won't
he's younger
dox
than me,
him.
I think he's younger than me. He's probably late 20s. IGK, put in the chat. Are you in your late 20s? I want to say.
I wonder who this could be. Who's
Jerome Worthy is my guess. Jerome Worthy from Michigan State is my guess. I don't know if he will reveal that to us or not, but I'm going to say it's Jerome Worthy. No, maybe not. Did he test well? I can't remember. I know he's sick.
I'm just trying to think who in the last 10 years, let's call it. No, if he's in his late 20s.
Spriggs. It was Jason Spriggs from Indiana, the tackle. Yeah, so he's got to be in his late 20s then. Oh, 32. Oh, I am way off there. Oh, so you're still younger than me, though.
So you complimented him. Nice.
Yeah, I did compliment him inadvertently.
Right.
Oh, man, Jason Spriggs was such a good tester coming out of Indiana, dude. Oh,
I remember him.
I remember him, too. I scouted him. He was, he was not great. He was not a great player.
We've got time for one more question before we close out. Let's get to this one. Do you think Hancock could be a mid?
Jordan Hancock.
Yeah, Jordan Hancock could be a mid to late, a steal. The wording of this, sorry, is tripping me up. Could be a mid to late round steal. I feel that he's underrated. What do you think?
I think he's underrated, but I will say this. I'm very interested to see how the NFL views him positionally, because he played majority nickel the last 2 years for Ohio State, but he was originally an outside corner. And then, Joe, I don't know if you've seen his testing numbers from his pro day, but he blew the roof off the place, man. Yeah. Really impressive athlete. So I'm interested to see. I think there's some teams that might view him as an outside corner. Some might view him as a nickel because he's played there, and some might view him as a safety. So, like, he's a versatile player, and I do think you're probably getting him somewhere in the 4th to 5th round, somewhere in that ballpark. And I do think he can be a steal in that instance because I still think there's some developmental upside there.
Yeah, good athlete who is a senior, so he's played a lot of football. He actually doesn't have bad length. He's got some pretty good, 6 foot.
He was an outside corner. He was an outside
almost 31-inch arms. Yeah. No, I remember Hancock was one of those guys, like whenever there's, and we're going to do this, we're literally going to play into this by as soon as the draft is over, we're going to drop our way too early mock draft. That there is always, as soon as one of those comes out, there's always a couple of positions from specific schools that always get just shoved into the first rounds of those way too early mocks. And it's always Ohio State receivers or corners. And I think that Hancock was one of those guys a few years ago, like 2 years ago, people were saying, oh, he could be a first round corner. And he didn't really pan out, and he moved in and he played a little bit of a different role, and he could be just somebody that sticks on a roster.
It's possible. Yeah. I mean, he's got versatility. He's played inside and out. I think he's got developmental upside. He got injured early in his career, which kind of set him back a little bit, but he's got a height weight speed to him. Actually, I think he's a little bit lighter weight. I think he was only like 180 something pounds at the pro day, but the kid can move. I think he ran like 4.41, had a nice vert. Like, he tested exceptionally well. So there definitely is still developmental upside there.
All right. I think we're going to close out on that one, Ryan. We're going to be back not on next Wednesday. Time to be determined, sometime Thursday morning, maybe like 10 o'clock. We're going to do a little bit of a longer.
Tell him the kicker. 2-hour show, baby.
Yes, we're sickos. We're going to try and go for 2 hours answering last second panic first round NFL draft questions. Be sure to be there. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Follow us on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft. Everybody, for the rest of your week.